DARPA calls it transhumanism, military transhumanism. But in an interesting way, this is actually part and parcel of the whole movement towards robotics. It's not only making individual warfighters comfortable with robots, it's this idea of coupling man and machine and merging humans and machine. And DARPA is doing that with programs now with what they call biohybrids, which people might call cyborgs. You know, they are able to actually control a rat through a labyrinth remotely because they've implanted electrodes in its brain. They can do the same with a moth. DARPA in 2014 created a steerable moth by inserting electrodes in the pupa stage of the moth, which then transformed. The wings came out, and this part of the machinery is now part of the animal system. DARPA is able to steer a moth. And when you ask about transhumanism, and as I write in the book, it all began in this very interesting moment decades ago. This is actually not new. It was when the Berlin Wall came down. Many Soviet bioweapons engineers defected to the United States, and DARPA hired them. A quote from a DARPA director at the time was, "We had no biologists in the Pentagon." They were busy having those people like the Jason scientists, supermen of scientists, men dealing with machines, engineers, physicists looking at these big space systems. But suddenly the idea that biology is important became what was called a thrust at DARPA, and there began this movement to look inside the body, to work with what they call the dismounted soldier, the guy that's walking on the ground. And this led to a whole new umbrella of programs, which is called augmented cognition, which is called, in short, the super soldier program. And it's how to make warfighters smarter than other warfighters, stronger than other warfighters. And again, these, are double-edged swords. Many people who are proponents of transhumanism say, why not control evolution? The cochlear implant, the pacemaker being great examples of, benefiting man by augmenting the physical body. People who are very against transhumanism say, there's something really wrong with this. I think the reason that I like writing narrative stories, as I do in my book, is that I tell it from the perspective of the people involved, and maybe you get to decide what you think of transhumanism.
So there are other elements that DARPA has very much been on the forefront of. And so it is getting down to, in some cases, how are we changing, or how can we change humans? But then it's also mapping humans. Again, seems to be going away from the idea of creating new weapon systems.
Quite the opposite.
But so what's really happening there?
Well, the limb regeneration lab, that's super interesting. It's this idea that humans can one day, regenerate their own limbs. And when I was interviewing the scientists down at UC Irvine who are working on this program, and I said, because what I try to do is make science simple, really make it understandable. And I said, but just help me out, make it really simple. Salamanders can regenerate their limbs, humans can't. How does that work? And Dr. Gardner said to me, well, actually, humans can regenerate. We all did. And I kind of looked at him and he said, we all began as one cell, and then we were two, and then we were more. That's regeneration. So we have the capacity to regenerate. And when you look at big science in that way, that these guys are taking big science and going small, that's big. Those are big ideas. DARPA's funding that. Is that a weapon system? No, that is, helping warfighters who lose limbs or individuals who lose limbs in accidents. But the brain programs are very different, because my understanding from interviewing DARPA scientists, the brain programs are presented by DARPA, and many of them are very classified. They're in the clinical trial stage. It's this idea of implanting neural prosthetics into the brain of brain-wounded warriors, so guys who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan with brain injuries, who have cognitive impairment. And this idea that these neural implants will help restore their brain functions. And so that is a noble idea, and DARPA has teamed up with the White House on the Brain Initiative to do this. But what many scientists said to me is there is also something else going on, which is DARPA mapping the brain, and DARPA using this information from the electrodes in the brain to learn about how the neural networks work, so that, and this is the idea, that long coveted barrier to break artificial intelligence can happen, because DARPA has been at the forefront of artificial intelligence since its inception, and no one has been able to figure out how to make machines think. And the idea is that these brain chip programs are actually will lead the way toward true artificial intelligence, which syncs right up in line with the idea of self-governance in autonomous weapons. I mean, there's many different things to speculate on, and I write about all of them in the book, but I think one thing that is clear, that is non-speculative, is this idea of moving toward autonomy in weapons. And the real question is, will DARPA be able to break that barrier of artificial intelligence? Will it be able to create hunter-killer robots that think? But on that idea, keep this in mind. The very first DARPA hunter-killer robot program was actually way back in 1983, and it was actually called Killer Robots. And the motto of the program was, "The battlefield is no place for human beings." So I think really the big question is, and I don't have the answer, is if there are no humans on the battlefield, where are they?